Hello and welcome to the All Monitor Brief. It's Monday, November 4th. I'm Kristen Tallman. Today's main segment is a conversation with Elizabeth Hagedorn, All Monitor's State Department correspondent. We'll talk to, regardless of who wins tomorrow on U.S. Election Day, November 5th, both candidates, whoever ends up in the White House, whether that be Vice President Kamala Harris or former President Donald Trump, will likely have to make decisions and deal with the conflict in the Middle East on day one. But first, let's get you caught up on the headlines. Turkey on Monday ousted 3 mayors in the Kurdish-majority southeast who were elected in nationwide elections, a replay of Ankara's sackings of dozens of mayors in the wake of the previous round of elections in 2019. Israeli settlers torched nearly 20 cars early Monday in the occupied West Bank city of Al-Beira near Ramallah. Sudan's army leader Fatah al-Burhan, at war with paramilitaries, has announced a cabinet reshuffle that replaces 4 ministers, including those for foreign affairs and the media. The late Sunday announcement comes with the Northeast African country gripped by the country's worst displacement crisis, threatened by famine and desperate for aid, according to the UN. Iran on Monday executed a member of the country's Jewish minority who has been convicted of murder, an NGO said, at a time of rising tensions with Israel. Israel formally notified the United Nations it was cutting ties with the agency supporting Palestinian refugees, it said Monday, after lawmakers voted to ban the organizations vital to the occupied territories. Gaza rescue workers said Israeli strikes in Gaza on Sunday killed at least 30 people as the Israeli military pursues its offensive against Hamas in the north of the Palestinian territory. And Lebanon's health ministry said 3 people were killed in an Israeli strike Sunday near the southern city of Sedan, as state media reported the recovery of 5 bodies from the Flashpoint southern town of Kiam. Tomorrow in the United States, Americans will head to the polls where they will vote for the 47th president of the United States. The president will take on the role in January after the inauguration. But it's an election that has profound consequences for the Middle East region and is one that across the Middle East, many leaders, diplomats, citizens, and people are watching. We have many pieces that I'll monitor that look at how the region from Israel to Iran to Saudi Arabia, UAE, Turkey, all are looking at this election and who they might just prefer to win. You can read all of those that I'll monitor. But first, let's turn to the conversation with Elizabeth on how each presidential candidate will approach the region. Hey, Elizabeth, welcome back to the All Monitor Brief.
Hi, Kristen. Thanks for having me.
So we are one day away from the U.S. elections, and Vice President Harris's stance on the Gaza war has hurt some of her standing with Arab American voters. We saw her make her sort of laugh pitch and mention it last night in Michigan. But what exactly is her position on the Israel-Gaza war?
Well, I should start out by pointing out that neither candidate, neither Harris nor Trump, has put forward a detailed vision for how they would approach the war. And given where ceasefire talks currently stand, it's very possible that they will have to contend with Gaza on day one in office. The big question with Harris is whether she would break with Biden's bear hug approach and impose conditions on U.S. military and diplomatic assistance that the Democratic Party's progressive wing has been calling for. Harris's supporters point out that she was the first member of the administration to call for an immediate Gaza ceasefire, and at least compared to Biden, she tends to show more empathy toward the Palestinians' plight when talking about the war. But while she may be more confrontational with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Harris has not distanced herself from Biden's position on arms supplies to Israel. Her national security advisor, Phil Gordon, made a point of saying Harris does not support an arms embargo.
Yeah, so there's more clarity around, well, there's some clarity around maybe, right, what Harris would do considering she was in the Biden administration. As you say, it remains to be seen if she'll break. What pressure would former President Donald Trump apply if in the White House in January? Has he said anything to the tune or given any inclination while on the campaign trail?
Well, what we know is that Trump's first term was filled with pro-Israel policies that upended decades of U.S. foreign policy, including his 2017 recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. In recent months, Trump has called for Israel to, quote, finish the problem in Gaza, and he's accused Biden of trying to hold back Netanyahu, an indication perhaps that Israel would have a freer hand to pursue its war if he were president. But at the same time, Trump has also called for Israel to, quote, quote, stop killing people in Gaza. And he's warned about the PR consequences of Israel's military offensive continuing. He declined to say in an interview in April whether he'd consider leveraging military aid to Israel. I should also point out here that as both candidates make final election appeals to voters on this issue, there is deep skepticism in Gaza and the West Bank. As Daoud Khattab reported for us, the view among many Palestinians is that neither Trump nor Harris would do much to meaningfully improve their situation.
Yeah. And then the bigger question that I'm also curious about is how each candidate would approach dealing with Tehran or through a back channel as well. How would they look at Iran during their terms?
Well, both candidates share the goal of preventing a nuclear-armed Iran, but we can expect them to tackle the issue quite differently. Remember that as president, Trump withdrew the United States from the Obama-era nuclear deal and reimposed a slew of economic sanctions on Iran. If he wins on Tuesday, we're likely to see a return of Trump's so-called maximum pressure campaign, which at the time, critics said did little to change Tehran's behavior, nor did it succeed in bringing Iran back to the negotiating table. Trump on the campaign trail has said he wants to strike a new deal with Iran, though he has said little about how it would differ from the one he dismantled. If elected, Harris has said a diplomatic solution is preferred to handle Iran's nuclear program, but that all options should be on the table to prevent it from weaponizing its program. Analysts say Iran's nuclear program is now too far advanced to restore the so-called breakout time of the 2015 deal, which at the time was set at 12 months. A Harris presidency could see a renewed push for a more limited deal or a set of informal understandings with Iran that attempts to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions in exchange for its much-needed sanctions relief.
And as you say, Elizabeth, these are all questions that both candidates, whoever is elected tomorrow and lands in the White House in January, will have to contend with. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kristen.
That's it for today, Monday, November 4th. You can read all these stories and more impacting the region at allmonitor.com.